Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Seals of Forgotten Time Chapter 11. Immediately following previous chapter. The sight of the man made Naruto the angriest he's ever been in his life. He looked the same he did when they last fought. The mask was white with a purple tint that covered the entire upper half of his head. The design resembled the Jubi's eye, consisting of a ripple pattern with 3 tomo around the center. 2 of those tomos acted as the mask's eye holes. He wore a pair of black pants and gloves, with a white, form-fitting shirt underneath. Over this he wore a purple, high-collared, long-sleeved mantle that splits down the lower half and has the Uchiha crest on the back. Around his waist, he wore a simple, light purple obi, and a slightly darker belt. Strapped to his back, he carried a purple gunbai, a larger non-folding fan, with black trimmings and black tomo, connected to a black chain that runs up his right sleeve. Hell no, I didn't miss you. How'd the hell you even find me? Naruto growled as he immediately launched himself at the masked man and punched him right in his masked face. The mask was broken immediately, but that's all that was broken as the man voiced his amusement. My oh my, you certainly have gotten faster since we've last met. Naruto just continued to growl and glare at the nearly forgotten man. Plus, I love what you did to yourself. You look like a completely different man. Especially now that you have the Rinnegan, he said as his revealed face openly glared at the silver-haired menace, his own Sharingan and Rinnegan shining bright. Ototo, who is this? Hiruzen asked, appearing next to his brother, muscles tense, ready to strike at a moment's notice. And why does he have a Sharingan and a Rinnegan? He questioned, his voice full of shock. Yes, Ototo, tell dear ol Hiruzen about the bad man from your past, he said. I tell you who he isn't. I know for sure he isn't Madara Uchiha, Naruto said, glaring at the man. The Sandaime didn't know how to respond to that, other than a raised eyebrow. Of course he isn't Madara. Sensei killed him, quite some time ago. Naruto narrowed his eyes and a ball of swirling chakra appeared in his hand. Tell me something I don't know, he said as his body shimmered out of sight. He appeared directly above the man and slammed his Rasengan down. Unfortunately it missed and impacted with the ground. That's the hasty Naruto-kun I remember. The man goaded, appearing on a nearby boulder. Now back to the subject at hand. It's obvious I'm not Madara, right? In this day and age, I think it's time I revealed my true name. I'm Obito Uchiha, pleased to meet you, the now revealed Obito said with a chuckle. The name didn't seem to affect anybody but Naruto. His breath hitched in his throat and his heart skipped a beat in shock. How could it be? I was told you died. How'd you survive a boulder landing on half of your body? Naruto yelled. The widening of his brother's eyes wasn't seen. Obito's face scrunched up in anger. Oh please, spare me your apparent concern. You weren't even born when it happened. You don't even know who I am, or who I was. So spare me the bullshit, he yelled, simultaneously firing 2 great fireballs. It happened so fast that Naruto's eyes barely picked up on the gathering chakra. He rose a hand and promptly absorbed the flaming chakra. It's amazing what 2 of the same dujutsu could do, huh? Obito seemed to calm down at that and smiled a crazed smile. I'm glad you brought that up. That's why I went through the liberty of getting this, he said, reaching into his sleeve and removing a glass jar filled with medical liquid and not surprisingly a certain left eye, with a pinwheel design. That's, Naruto stammered. That's right, it's my eye. You should have heard the screams from your old sensei as I took back what was mine, Obito said as the air around his body became distorted for a few seconds. Naruto watched, truthfully, amazed as the Rinnegan was replaced with his own eye, now changed to the regular 3-tomo look of the Sharingan. Feels good to have my eye back. I've got to say, I missed this thing, he said with a dark chuckle as he brushed his hand over the ocular organ. Naruto could feel the chakra signatures of the other shinobi itching closer to their location. Let's say we take this party elsewhere. After all, this doesn't concern them, Naruto said, taking a deep breath for an unknown reason. Obito looked at the previously blonde man, as he too felt the other people getting closer. Okay, I'll grant your wish, too bad, it was your only one. I would have granted you mercy, since you no longer hold the Kyuubi no Kitsune, he said, appearing right beside Naruto. I know just where to go. he said, laying a hand on the Uzumaki, and they were surrounded by the distortion that was Kamui. A few seconds later they vanished, just as the Raikage and many others landed around the spot the Hokage still occupied. What the fuck just happened? Hiruzen asked with an angered tone. X. Naruto exited the Kamui's distortion to see something familiar. You brought us to the Valley of the End. That's pretty nostalgic, Naruto said, looking at the, recently finished, statues that framed the waterfall. The two shinobis stood atop the large body of water at the feet of the two great warriors. I know it seems nostalgic to you, but now you have to fight another Uchiha at this site. Obito said, looking up at the body of his sensei. Did you know, Madara is still alive at this point in time? Naruto ignored the question, already suspecting the answer. Of course he's still alive. Kakashi told me about you and the rest of your team. What I want to know is, how the hell did you survive a boulder crushing the right side of your body? Naruto's eyes flashed before Obito's body was pushed further away from him, not trusting the close proximity. Obito righted himself in the air and softly landed on the water, not disturbing the surface in the slightest. He wiped the imaginary dirt off his attire before he smirked at the Konoha. You have my sensei to thank for that. Naruto narrowed his ringed eyes at the Uchiha. My father saw. Naruto tried to start before he was cut off. Namikaze didn't do a damn thing. Obito yelled, his twin Sharingan eyes spinning angrily. It was nearly instantaneous, but Naruto's eye saved him yet again. He leapt high in the air, as black flames blazed to life at his previous location. I guess the talking portion of this encounter is over, Naruto thought while creating a dense foothold of wind. It was Madara who saved my life. And it's his teachings that created the man you see today. And it's this man who's going to kill you and collect the remaining Biju. Obito exclaimed as chakra exploded out of his body. The previous Jinchuriki's eyes widened at the new Jinchuriki. You absorbed 8 Biju in your body. The silver-haired Jonin exclaimed, feeling the combined signatures of the demonic creatures. The key ones were, the Ikibi, and surprisingly the Hachibi. You ripped out B's demon, Naruto said, immediately tensing his muscles as a dense tentacle of chakra shot towards him. Having already been in the air, he was prepared for what was coming. But he wasn't prepared for the speed at which it traveled. Luckily, with a quick Rasengan, he was able to fend off the appendage for enough time for him to jump away, which was about a second. Damn, that was fast, Naruto thought as the destroyed piece of chakra reformed before his eyes. You can't be surprised I went and took the Hachibi. I mean, it was my goal, Obito said, sending the tentacle again and again. Naruto dodged. This went on for about 5 dodges when a second tentacle sprouted from the first, and another, until 10 tentacles were chasing Naruto. The Jonin cursed himself for being in the air, because the appendages were coming from all angles. But he didn't beat himself up too much, because it would have been a little worse on the ground, considering a few could have come from underground. You can't dodge these forever, you're going to eventually have to get closer to do any damage. At least your father knew how to fight, unlike the son. Obito goaded, sending all the tentacles simultaneously from all angles. That's where you're wrong, Naruto said, promptly pushing the chakra tendrils away and destroying them. There's one thing my father and I share, Naruto said, vanishing from his spot, before appearing behind the Uchiha, promptly pushing a Rasengan into his back, effectively sending him quite a ways away. And that's our hatred for all things that threaten our life. And I'm sure that if my father knew that it was you who purposely wreaked havoc on the village all those years ago, then he would have fought with a lot more intensity. Bansho Tenin, all creation attraction. Obito's body froze in midair, only to be pulled with such force. Naruto was already finishing his hand seals. Doden. Shimei Tekina Yari. Deadly spears. After slamming his hands on the ground, dozens of earthen spikes jutted from the ground, ready for Obito's body to be pierced by it. The Uchiha screamed in terror as his body neared the spikes at amazing speeds. Only for his screams to die out quickly and be replaced by a smirk. Just kidding, he said as obsidian chakra burst from all of his tenketsu, destroying the spears, and making Naruto quickly end his pull and jump out of the way. Obito skidded along the ground, making a twin set of trenches before his body stopped. Sorry about that, I haven't had much training with this eye, it took me a while to bring it out, he said as gigantic ribs covered his person, surrounded by black, fiery, chakra. Naruto looked at the ever-growing construct that was Obito's Susanoo. The only other time he's ever fought a Susanoo was during his fight with Sasuke, and that was no easy feat. I have no worries though, my Preta abilities will absorb that with absolutely no difficulty. Naruto thought, feeling no fear as the ripples in his Dujutsu looked as if they were moving slightly. So without further ado, I begin the steps to end this fight. Naruto spoke with a finished tone. Asura path, he thought, thrusting his right arm forward, watching as it extended further. Multiple tendrils connected the fired hand as it sped towards the massive construct of chakra. Obito's eyes widened a bit, not expecting that in the slightest. He jumped backwards, away from the speeding appendage. Unfortunately, his Susanoo was too big, that it clearly remained in its place and was swiftly grabbed. 5 of the 6 tendrils that were controlling the hand ripped from the hand and promptly sprouted hands of their own, which proceeded to wrap around Susanoo. Again the Uchiha's eyes widened, as he didn't have any experience with this ability. He tried to retract Susanoo, but ending the technique was hard when his pull was being overshadowed by Naruto's pull. That Preta ability is becoming bothersome, he muttered, flowing through some hand seals. Gokaku no Jutsu, great fireball technique, he breathed, spewing out his house-sized ball of fire, 2 more soon joining. Naruto smirked as he raised his left hand, palm outward, and a barrier surrounded his person, swiftly absorbing the fiery chakra. Sadly, I have to agree with Nagato, you can't possibly come close to defeating me, for I am God. Naruto said, dropping his fingers, leaving only his index pointing at Obito. Raiden. Senhari no Arashi. Storm of 1,000 needles. Hundreds of bright yellow needles fired from Naruto's finger, directly heading for Obito. The needles of electricity continued to bounce off the armor of Susanoo. Obito looked on, knowing that eventually the continued barrage was going to pierce his defense. Not ready for that to happen, he flowed through more hand seals before clapping his hands. Futon. Teifu Bakuden. Typhoon bomb. Just as the name suggests, a large cyclone of wind exploded around Obito and his Susanoo. The technique was easily one of his strongest in his vast arsenal. Naruto's eyes widened after seeing the familiar technique. The pull effectively lifted his body toward the rapidly swirling vortex of wind, water, and even large boulders from the nearby mountain. His body collided with one of the large boulders, and promptly used chakra to stick himself to it. After that he reeled in his extended metal arm, ending his Asura powers and returning the appendage to flesh. I can't believe he would take one of my techniques like that. Naruto thought, having used a completely smaller version of the technique against Sasuke, it previously being the size of his own body, resembling the Hyuga clan's own Kaden. Naruto flew in circles until he got a hold on his chakra, Shinra Tensei. He yelled, making the circumference of the push a full 50 meters. The push was effective in disrupting the technique enough that it couldn't be continued. Naruto floated there, panting a little as he glared at Obito, who was smirking at him and working on returning the armor to his Susanoo that was previously pulled off by the former blonde. Do you like what I did to your jutsu? You have to admit that my version is much more effective than yours, he goaded the Rinnegan-wielding man with another smirk. Naruto ran a hand through his hair, calming his frustration. An angry mind is a narrow mind, he repeated to himself in his head. In fact, I love what you did to it. It's very useful against multiple enemies and has the ability to disrupt chakra. How? I didn't figure that part out, but my Rinnegan is working on that as I speak. Naruto said, dropping down to stand on the water. You know, the most intriguing aspect of this fight is that you haven't been using your Kamui ability. Why is that? Why use something that isn't necessary? You'll never get close enough to touch me or even get past my Susanoo. The Uzumaki chuckled in amusement. Do you really think I can't get near you? I can get near you right now if I wanted, Naruto said, slamming his hands on the water surface. Nothing seemed to happen for the first few seconds. Obito was about to call on his bluff when a large great white leapt a few feet in the air, just in front of the Uchiha. His Sharingan eyes were able to peer into one of the shark's eye, a ripple-designed eye was glaring back at him. Your animal path finally takes its turn in this fight, Obito said, quickly retreating away from the water, landing on a 40-meter wide island of land. Now it's time for my trick. After he said that, 8 columns of earth rose from the ground and shaped themselves to look exactly like 8 of the previous Jinchuriki. Think of these as a reunion. Sadly, it's not a full reunion, since the Kyuubi is no longer in your gut. But still, it's the thought that counts, right? Obito said with a sick chuckle as their individual demonic cloaks covered their beings, ranging from Gaara and his Ikibi, to Killer Bee and his Hachibi. And last but not least, Obito and his complete, obsidian-colored Susanoo, resembling Sasuke's own Susanoo, since the boy fed off of Obito's hatred. Naruto narrowed his eyes and created 9 clones. One stood in front of the creator, effectively blocking Obito's view. A second later he vanished from the spot. Naruto sent another mental command to the clone and smiled when its signature multiplied and vanished. That's a pretty neat trick indeed, Uchiha. Since you had to do that, I had to create these guys. That was nice of me, don't you think? The original said as his clones activated their own special cloak. Just because I ditched the fox, doesn't mean I ditched its power. Naruto said with a smirk. Naruto could see a small smirk framing his opponent's face. I don't like that look. Naruto thought out loud. It's quite a coincidence really. Obito said after the clones spread out to fight around the area. Naruto narrowed his eyes, before he vanished in the blink of an eye. It happened so quick, Obito was quite surprised when it happened. Susanoo was shattered, its chakra now a part of Naruto. Not to mention the orange pigment around his eyes and the horizontal, toad-like, pupil that sat in the middle of the ripples in his eye. That and a small smirk was all Obito seen before Naruto blasted towards him. I have got to say that you sure are surprising me, Obito said as the golden-shrouded warrior passed right through him. Naruto sucked his teeth in annoyance, that just had to be his Sharingan's ability. Intangibility is bullshit, Naruto thought with a glare. That doesn't matter, I just have to stall for another minute or two. Naruto thought as a mental update alerted him of the progress. The plan just has to work. Enough talk, Naruto said as the shark from before rocketed out of the water, straight towards Obito. The Uchiha didn't move an inch, because the monster of the sea was going to fall short anyway. He glared at the beast when it didn't seem to lose any altitude and gained more speed. A quick second later and it was ignited with the black flames of Amaterasu, and simply flew through him and disappeared in a puff of smoke halfway through. The dense smoke obscured his vision and was laced with chakra. That's when he noticed that an extremely dense fog covered the area. Using the massive source of water to create this fog, and spreading your chakra outward, so I couldn't get a read on it. That's impressive, it really is. Too bad I'm better at it, Obito said as the fog was amplified tenfold and his own chakra was everywhere. You fucking copycat, Naruto yelled from all directions. Obito chuckled to himself, before the earth beneath him started crumbling to little pieces. He paid it little mind and bounded away. He could barely sense the signatures of demonic clones. The Ikibi, Nibi, Sanbi, Gobi, and Hachibi were the only ones still active, the rest had fallen quite easily. Wait, scratch that, the Gobi just fell. They all seemed to be getting sealed by the death god if he wasn't mistaken. So you know that jutsu, huh? Laughter filled the area. No, I don't know that technique. But you forget who our ancestor was. He didn't defeat the Jubi with Fuinjutsu, he did it using both the Preta and human paths. The same abilities that just removed 5 of your previous 8 from the fight, and is working on removing the other 3 as we speak. Naruto said as shurikens of wind flew through the man. Do you really think I'll use the actual Bai? You could just stop right there, because we both know you did. While in this form I could sense all forms of evil, and when you split, the way you did, so did the amount of evil within you. That's where you fucked up. And with that said, I'm ending this fight, Naruto said as the fog, both his and Obito's, completely cleared up. With the removal of the fog, came removal of the last Jinchuriki in play, the Hachibi. Naruto stood atop the head of the Shodai with his other 8 clones all over the statue. These beasts don't belong in this time, and neither do you, Naruto said as blinding light permeated area. Let's test this out properly. The Jonin took a few breaths as he rocketed toward Obito with unparalleled speed. It seemed as if he vanished with a golden flash. He appeared to Obito's right and proceeded to catch the man off guard with a punch that completely destroyed the man's rib cage, on the right side. The Uchiha was sent straight into the waterfall, putting a man-sized crater in the earth behind the falling liquid. The Uzumaki breathed another sigh as his sage mode vanished, before returning. Only 2 more of those left. I need to finish this fight now. The longer I stay away from the others, the more questions they'll have. After that thought crossed his mind, Naruto flew through a set of hand seals, with his cloak sprouting a set of hands itself and forming its own hand seals. Sweden. Uzu Ryu no Hoko. Vortex Dragon's Roar. A 30-meter wide whirlpool started forming right behind the Jonin. The swirling mass of water rose out of the water, keeping its spinning motion as the front of it, opening its maw and sounding a gurgling roar. It was surprisingly more frightening than it sounded. That's when Naruto's other set of hand seals finished. Raiden. Sen Majibaruto. 1000 merging volts, Naruto thought as the dragon was amplified 1000-fold. After that, Naruto formed the dragon hand seal and sent the swirling mass of water, wind, and lightning, straight into the waterfall. The secret behind the light was revealed. It was the seal that was supposed to be used all those years ago, but was modified without his knowledge. It was a seal that was designed to nullify all Sharingan's abilities. He had a similar seal that nullified the effects of the Byakugan. But what he found out about the seal he tried to make before he was sent back in time, was that it would have only cancelled the Sharingan's ability to predict movement. He was ecstatic when he figured that out, but he had no idea how a modified version of that sent him back in time. The point of all that was to say that Obito couldn't Kamui himself out of the way. He had to get out of the zone the seal affected. It was a mile in each direction with 8 similar seal tags in an octagon formation. He didn't have a specific name for it, but it was an awesome seal that required a buttload of chakra. Back to the vortex, it completely tore through the valley. The electricity coursing through the vortex made it seem like the rock was melted butter. Naruto's 8 clones gathered around the original, gazing at the destruction the technique caused. "Dang boss, you didn't have to go Nadime on him," one of the clones said. Naruto looked at the clone and sighed. "You can't take any chances with powerful ninja," Naruto basically said as he rose his hand in the air. The wind picked up around him in a violent tornado. Each of his clones stiffened as their life force and the Biju inside each of them were sucked into the spinning abyss. Naruto then summoned the King of Hell, in which it swallowed the mass of chakra and sent it to Hell. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief, thankful that it was all over. Naruto wondered if Obito was dead or not, so he held out his hand. Slowly, a mass of black chakra started forming above his hand. "It's bastardized, but it'll still cause some serious damage," Naruto thought as a fist-size ball of dense, black, chakra was completed. He released another large sigh and threw it at the destroyed area. After that, mentally searched for something before he vanished from his spot. A massive explosion rocked the area just after he left. Kumogakure no Sato. Naruto appeared at the same spot he previously occupied before he and Obito started their fight. He looked down at the ground to see black markings in the dirt. "Thank you, Father, for the time-saving seal," Naruto said, covering up the seal even more, in case Kumo ever betrayed them and he needed to slip into the lion's den. He looked around to see if anyone was around and wasn't surprised to find nobody. He's been gone for more than an hour and simply waiting wasn't on their to-do list. "I have to think of a false background for that bastard," Naruto sighed as he began walking out of the training ground. X. Z sat in his office, along with Sarutobi as they discussed more of their business. "Like I said before, Z Dono, I'm glad you want to enter an alliance with us. We're still helping some of our minor allies rebuilding their villages, and having Kumo on the same team would put a lot of us at ease," Sarutobi said, sitting across from the rakeage. "It's our pleasure to help a fellow village in need. The war was truly something else. Sitting on the sidelines, watching the other villages fight for territory, made me think about my own," Z said, rubbing his beard. "Yes, I know what you mean. Some of the villages in the country were annexed by Iwagakure. That was our most shameful of events, but a very skilled team was able to infiltrate and regain control of the city. There were some unfortunate casualties, but it was out of our hands," Hiruzen informed with a sigh. Z nodded. It hadn't happened to them, but he knew that it resulted in an obvious drop in morale. "Now you have proper help, in the form of Kumogakure. Yugakure, is dropping out of the shinobi profession and slowly making its way to becoming a tourist spot. Your allies in the form of Kiba no Kuni and Sum no Kuni weren't very much help against Iwa's ruthlessness. Uzushiogakure has sadly been destroyed by Iwa, only a few Uzumakis roam the earth, your brother included. Though, that may have changed with his recent and mysterious visitor. Hiruzen listened to the man list off the allies that were dropping out of their alliance with Konoha with narrowed eyes. It was as if he was plotting something in the future, something he had to watch out for. He would have thought about it further if he hadn't sensed Naruto enter the village. I wouldn't say my brother is dead, since he's very much alive. Z widened his senses and felt the, rather large, signature of Naruto indeed enter the vicinity of his village. That he has. The man simply said. Perhaps we should end the meeting now, and continue our discussion tomorrow. Z said, standing up, and bowed in respect. The Hokage stood up as well and executed an equally respectful bow in return. Of course, you surely have lots of paperwork to do. Until tomorrow, Raikage Dono. Until tomorrow, Hokage Dono. Z said, watching Hiruzen leave. After the door closed, he narrowed his eyes and sat down with a frustrated grunt. Until next time. With Naruto. As soon as Naruto entered the village, he noticed Orochimaru and Dan waiting for him. As he was walking up to them, he saw Dan give Orochimaru what looked like 1,000 ryo. I don't even want to know, Naruto said as he reached them. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm headed to the nearest bar, I need a drink. You coming? Naruto said, not stopping to check their responses. Dan looked at Orochimaru with a smirk. The snake user sighed and gave the man 2,000 ryo. Konohagakure. Shinzu sat in the, very comfortable, chair of the village's leader. He slowly browsed through important documents, pertaining to the problems of the village. In his right hand was a quill, to sign the papers he deemed was for the good of the village. And in his left hand was a bottle of sake that said, if you're reading this, Shinzu, that means I'm going to kill you. But in his defense, he just finished a meeting with Danzo. He didn't know what the man needed funding for, when he had plenty of money for himself. He had a feeling that since the man needed more money, he was planning on continuing his route program. Since Hokage-sama left, we've had 2 missing cases happened. It just had to be Danzo's doing, who else would it be? Shinzu thought, putting the bottle down. He stood to his feet and reached into his vest, removing a pack of cigarettes. He took one and lit it, before a knock on his door sounded. He stared out into the setting sun before he released a puff of smoke before he spoke up, come in. In walked his 11-year-old son, Shikaku, along with his 2 teammates, Choza Akamichi and Inoichi Yamanaka, plus their sensei, Homura Mitokado, who also doubled as one of Hiruzen's counselors. His son's short hair was a little messy and was being held down by a bandage. The bandage was wrapped around the right side of his head, with his right eye still being visible. His Chunin vest had a few slices into it, but other than that, he was undamaged on the torso. Ah, son, what the hell happened to you? Shinzu questioned, blowing out a puff of smoke. Shikaku looked at the ground in frustration. An enemy blindsided him on the way back from our mission. Choza told the father. If you tell me, it was my own fault, Inoichi said. Shinzu looked at his son's comrade. You had a simple search and seizure mission. Explain yourself. He spoke with a bit of anger leaking into his voice. Inoichi was in the mind of the ambush leader, getting him to fight his comrades, while Choza and I protected his body. Sensei was allowing me to lead the mission and thus was only providing support from afar. Shinzu glared at the aging man who shifted his eyes away from the temporary leader of the village. I seen the attacker, but I was a second too late. 2 kunai flew by his face, slightly cutting into it, and 3 more hit his vest. Luckily it protected him from certain death. Homura said in a soft, nearly apologetic, tone. Shinzu returned his gaze back to his son, who was now looking at him with a hard face. Go home and help your mother tend to the deer. I'll be there soon to further your training. Shikaku's hard face paled just a bit, but hardened once more. Hi to San, Shikaku said, walking out of the room, with his fellow Chunin following his lead and returning home to further training. Shinzu held his hand up, halting Homura's retreat. Who did the ambushing? 6 Iowa Chunin and 3 Jonin. They attacked so fast, I wasn't even able to detect. It was Inoichi that sensed the ambush before it happened. That took the surprise out of the attack and allowed us to position ourselves while giving the guys a simple small talk. Homura then went into detail about how the fight went on. How he himself dropped back and provided the support when it was needed. He regretted not saving Shikaku from injury, but he had to admit, the boy took the injury like a man, until after the fight ended. I see, Shinzu said, putting out his cigarette. What happened to the target? He questioned, as that hadn't come up in the entire conversation. We sent it to the cryptanalysis squad, though we fear it may be for naught. I was only going to change their defense protocols, when they realize what happened. They won't find out, if you did your job correctly. Who knows, maybe they thought they were going to end up killing you. That could have stopped them from sending someone to the village beforehand, the Nara said, crossing his arms in thought. We can only cross our fingers for that. If we killed everybody, then the village won't find out for another 2 weeks. By that time we could think of another course of action, the elder said. I'll have to send the Hokage an update on this. He'll want to know what's happening in his village, Shinzu said, grabbing a blank sheet of paper and begun his update to the Hokage. You're dismissed now, he said without looking up. Homura bowed and exited the office. XXXXXXX. Danzo stood in his new underground lair. A group of 20 root agents trained in various forms of taijutsu and kenjutsu. Another group of 10 root agents worked in pairs to work on their various genjutsu. Lastly, there was another set of 20 more agents working on their infiltration tactics around the largish compound. The 50 agents mentioned were all rookies in the program, so only 25 would really be allowed to join. You could tell they were rookies because of the red stripes running vertically down their individual masks. The masks themselves had to be worn at all times, until they gained their new, completely white masks, which also had to be worn at all times. Danzo craned his neck to get a better view of the approaching agent. After all these years and I'm still able to sense you. Apologies Danzo-sama, but stealth was not on my mind. I just came to give you an update about what's happening in Tsuchi no Kuni, the agent said, kneeling on one knee. The aging man glanced at his subject for a few moments before returning his eye back to the trainees. Speak, he simply said. It was pretty standard for the village to request provisions from their daimyo, so I'll leave it at that. The most interesting part was when a group of Chunin infiltrated a defense-oriented building. They made off with their objective, but missed someone. A Chunin escaped the attack and ran to the village, the agent informed. Am I to assume that you corrected the problem? Danzo asked, narrowing his eye, already having a feeling who was going to become new members and who was going to be cut from the program. Correct Danzo-sama, the Chunin wasn't anything special. Good, dismissed, Danzo said before the man got up and left in a leafless shunshin. Sooner or later a war's going to start. The tricky part about starting a war is that Konoha can't be the cause. Hiruzen is busy in Kumo, becoming allies with the fellow powerhouse. Iwa is busy rebuilding, so they wouldn't be stupid enough to enter another war so soon. Hiri is having trouble in their own home, so they won't do it. That only leaves Suna, but they too are busy returning stability. I'll just give them all time. Until then I'll continue protecting Konoha from the shadows. Danzo thought with a grunt as he saw another mistake one of the trainees made. He narrowed his eye, silently giving the rookie one more chance before he's forced to kill the teen out of disappointment. Back in Kumo, Naruto stumbled into the hotel room the Konoha team was provided during their stay. Each of his arms were Orochimaru and Dan as they helped him into the room. Okami, I'm not going to miss you when the mission's over if you're going to be drinking the entire time, Dan said, tossing Naruto onto the couch in the hotel room. The room was rather luxurious with its 3 rooms and 2 bathrooms. If this wasn't a hotel, it would serve as a nice permanent home. OPSSHHH, I was only in there for a few hours. Naruto slurred drunkenly. I don't feel like typing his drunken speech, so just use your imagination. The snake user scoffed and tossed the silver-haired Jonin's headband at him. He had flashed it to the bartender and told him that he was a Konoha diplomat and demanded 5 more bottles of sake. The only reason why the barkeep didn't kick him out was because he had already bought 10 bottles for himself. I don't know how your teammates put up with you after missions. You better not act like that in front of your children, I don't want them picking up on that. Orochimaru said, not listening to the man's mumbling slurs. It was then that they noticed the Hokage was already in the hotel room, by the smell of his distinct flavor of tobacco. I'm going to see how the meeting went, Dan said as Naruto started snoring loudly. The two shinobi stared at the sleeping drunk with blank faces. I told you he was going to be out within 5 minutes. Orochimaru said, extending his hand. Damn Naruto, you couldn't stay awake for at least 6 minutes. Dan said, reluctantly giving the snake user 5,000 ryo. Hiruzen walked into the living room of the hotel room to see his snoring brother. He released a sigh, blowing out a stream of smoke. Did he at least tell you about who the mysterious man was? The two men shook their head in the negative. He dodged the question immediately or completely ignored us when we asked. That was only before the 5th bottle of sake, and by that time he was already considered drunk. He kind of went overboard with the drinking though, Orochimaru told his sensei. Yeah, I'm quite surprised he hadn't vomited yet. Dan gave his own input in, nearly expecting Naruto to throw up because it was mentioned, but was denied. He was glad he hadn't thrown up. That stuff stinks. Alright, you two follow his example and rest up. Tomorrow is story time. The sannin said, chuckling to himself while he walked up to his brother's body and picked him up, bridal style. After that he walked back to his room to put his brother in his bed. I guess I'll cancel getting an update about the meeting then, Dan said, returning to his appointed room. What's to tell Dan? It was a meeting. A regular boring meeting, Hiruzen said before closing his door. The Hokage's room was the only one that had 2 separate beds. Honestly though, he missed hearing his brother's snores. They were rather relaxing, when he was younger. Now they were louder and the stench of sake constantly escaped the man's mouth. I'm glad thought of this beforehand. The Hokage thought, forming a hand seal and releasing more of his flavored smoke into the air, and in the air it stayed. Now, instead of sake filling the air, it was the spicy aroma of cinnamon. Ah, that's better. The snoring is still kind of loud though, the man muttered before an idea struck his mind. He grabbed Naruto's hand and stuck his thumb in his mouth. Ah ha ha, just wait until he wakes up. He hasn't done that in a long decade, Hiruzen said through chuckles as he walked back to his bed. He smiled at his brother before turning off the light. Good night, Ototo, he said, laying down. It was faint, but he swore he heard a mumbled reply of, good night, old man. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes and threw one of his pillows at his sleeping brother. Naturally it connected with Naruto's face. The Jonin simply grunted and wrapped his arms around the pillow and mumbled his wife's name. Next day, it was already noon when Naruto woke. He rose and stretched his arms. It was at that moment that loud pounding screeched directly in his ears. Ah, he yelled, clamping his pillow around his hand, muffling the sound a little. He glared at the laughing Dan, his Rinnegan fully activated, and pushed him outside the window, shattering the plated glass. The man's laughing was heard all the way down. Stupid bastard, Naruto mumbled. Naruto walked out of the room, into the living room kitchen. I told him not to do that, but you've got to admit that it was funny, Orochimaru said, pushing a cup of coffee towards the blonde. I should push you too, Naruto muttered, narrowing his ripple eyes at the snake user. Dan returned in puff of smoke, still laughing. That was classic, he said, still laughing. Two Kumo Anbu appeared in the room, staring at the trio with livid eyes. Sorry, that was my fault, I'll pay for it, Naruto apologized, one hand covering one of his ears, the other on his cup of coffee. Be sure you do. Next time, we'll arrest you, regardless of who you are, one of the Anbu said before the duo vanished. Like we'll let you, Naruto mumbled, taking a quick sip. Behave, Naruto, we're not here to start an international incident, Dan said. Yeah, we're here to become allies. I know that, Tem. I like how they act like I didn't just save most of their village yesterday, Naruto said, taking a large gulp of coffee. Speaking of yesterday, who was that guy? He seemed really powerful. I'm surprised nobody heard of him, except for you. There's a lot we're in the dark about, so please shine some light on this subject, Orochimaru said, watching Naruto walk to the coffee pot. Who was who? Naruto asked while pouring some more coffee. He wasn't surprised when a snake wrapped itself around his arm and hissed at him. No more games, Naruto. Either tell us now, or I'm going to inject you with enough poison that even Tsunade would have problems removing it all. Naruto glared at the snake user, his Rinnegan piercing through the man's eyes. That's a cute threat, Orochi. I wonder if you've already forgotten the last time we fought. Orochimaru smirked at that. You're the one that seems to have a bad memory. If you don't remember me winning that fight, I'm surprised you're able to remember half of your techniques. Naruto scoffed as his arm shined with a certain metallic sheen, as a blade sprouted out of Naruto's arm, slicing through the snake effortlessly. His skin returned to normal and he wiped the snake guts off his arm. You only won because you were more clever, but you know I was kicking your ass the entire time. Naruto said, taking another sip from his new cup of coffee. And plus I really can't remember most of my techniques, he muttered, turning his head from the two. Dan was on the verge of falling on the floor with how much he was laughing. You're serious? Orochimaru asked, to which Naruto nodded. I have so many that it's easy to forget sometimes. Naruto said, blushing a little. Now Orochimaru freely joined Dan's excessive laughing. Shut up, you're in the same boat as me. I know how you are, always on the search for a new technique. Naruto said, getting annoyed. As long as you don't dip into the Forbidden Archive, if you hadn't already. Naruto thought, now narrowing his eyes in thought. Naruto scoffed and took his hangover antidote into his room to take a quick shower, and get out of his current attire. The sound of laughter was still heard in his room. It only died down when he went into the shower. A long 20 minutes later Naruto walked out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his midsection. A few seals decorated his skin, his summoning seal with the wolves on his right arm. 5 triangles were on his wrists, ankles, and the right side of his neck, one for each area, and a pentagon on his right pectoral muscle. They made up his gravity seal, and had a 4 inside each of the shapes. The kanji of Tsunade's name was right over his heart. A few more moments later and he was out wearing his modified Jonin attire. Alright, let's go see what kind of food they have here. I'll fill you in over some breakfast, I'm starving. Naruto said, tying his headband, loosely, around his neck. You might want to put your sandals on first. Dan said with a snicker. Of course. Naruto grinned, going to his room to put his sandals on. He silently and slowly created a sealess clone. He simultaneously masked his chakra just as the clone came into existence. You know what to do. I'm going to Konoha. Don't screw up. Naruto said, pressing his onto the floor, effectively tagging a Hiroshin seal deep into wood. You know I worked on the range, so we'll use that to coordinate my return. Naruto thought, leaving the room in a silver flash. Come on Naruto, it doesn't take that long to put sandals on. Dan said, entering the room, just as the clone finished taping his ankles down. Sorry Tem, I also forgot to tape my ankles down, the clone said, chuckling as he stood up. Dan narrowed his eyes at the silver-haired clone, making it sweat inwardly. Whatever, you're paying. The clone grumbled while following Dan. Not fair, I paid for the room on the way here. In Konoha, Naruto appeared in his room, his wife not in it. He widened his senses and noticed his wife and his 3 adopted children in the backyard, their small reserves of chakra flaring in little bursts. How long have they been doing that, or did they just start? Naruto thought, keeping his chakra masked. He noticed his window was open, causing him to grin. It's almost like she knew I was coming here. Naruto thought with a mental chuckle. The Jonin watched his family train, loving the view his wife was unknowingly showing him. I love you, he whispered, letting the wind carry his voice down to Tsunade's ear. After that he smiled and vanished into the wind, towards his destination. Tsunade heard 3 little words that meant so much to her, from a familiar voice. Her heart skipped a beat and immediately looked up towards her window. I love you too Naruto, she said lovingly, putting her hand over her heart. Naruto's smile widened as he continued to bound through the village, not a single person knowing he was even in the village, except for maybe Tsunade. Moments later he appeared at his destination, the head Uzumaki household. Like at his own house, Mito was in the backyard continuing Kushina's training. Naruto's voice turned into a scowl. How the hell am I supposed to get her away from Kushina? Naruto thought, because the exercise Kushi-chan was going through required immediately attention. Naruto narrowed his eyes before he gave up. Damn, he said, dropping down, being sure to land softly, and not in Kushina's sight. He didn't want her to lose concentration and land on the bed of hot coals. Mito seen him immediately and gasped in surprise. "Hey Naruto, aren't you supposed to be on a mission?" The auburn-haired, bun-styled, Uzumaki said, walking to the man. The two sensed Kushina's chakra flare in excitement. Her Rinnegan eyes opened and searched for her Ni-san. "Don't lose concentration, Kushi-chan. I did that once. It was a bad day with Suheim healing me the entire day. You're lucky though, I had to do that shirtless," he said, noting her lightly padded jacket. "I already told her that. What are you doing here?" Mito said, crossing her arms. Naruto chuckled, looking at the old woman. She was twice his age, maybe even 3 times, and yet she looked around the age of 30. "I hope Tsunade always looks young, even if she's only 25% Uzumaki." Naruto thought. "I'm here on business," he said, creating a clone. "Watch Kushi-chan, give her pointers if need be," Naruto told the clone while he led Mito inside. "It seems that I was wrong about something from my past. It seems that Madara is indeed still alive in this time, but not the person that caused me to come here," Naruto said, sitting down. "So what do you want me to do about it?" Mito asked, sitting across from him. Naruto's face went blank to prevent her from figuring out that he didn't really know. "You don't really know, do you?" Mito asked, shaking her head, feeling embarrassed for the young man. Naruto scratched his cheek in embarrassment. "Yeah, sorry, I didn't really think this through." Mito released a sigh and stood to her feet. "I'll check with the hospitals to see if he's been born yet. After that you'll have to take over, because I'm not going to kill an infant." Naruto crossed his arms in thought. "Yeah, I'm not going to kill him either. Kakashi told me he was just like me when I was a kid, the first time." Naruto mused to himself. Could Madara really have changed him to that degree, or is there something I'm missing? Or did something else happen to the young Uchiha? Naruto thought, standing up, knowing what he had to do next. "Thank you for the help, Mito-sama." Naruto stopped himself from saying the bad word while in the house, while he bowed in respect to the Uzumaki clan head. The matriarch of the clan was happy to return the bow to someone that felt like her grandson, which he was being married to Tsunade and a member of the Uzumaki clan. "So what are you going to do now?" she asked, rising from her bow. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know. Say bye to Kushi-chan, go home to the wife and kids, then head back to Kumo. It should all take a few minutes," Naruto said with a nonchalant wave of his hand. Mito suppressed a giggle. "You must be the fastest ninja alive," she said. Naruto flashed her a grin. "Yup, just like my father," he said, walking out to kiss his Kushi-chan on the forehead. "Don't fall, don't fall, don't fall," he repeated with each kiss, before it turned to tickling. She laughed, losing most of her concentration. Naruto had the solution and caught her in the arms and spun her in a hug. "Who's your big bro?" he asked with a smile. With a smile on her face, her rippling eyes shining bright, she poked Naruto on the forehead. "You are," she said, giggling. Mito walked outside to this scene. She gave a soft smile as she stood in the doorway. Naruto looked over at Mito. "As soon as I return to the village, officially, we'll start the transfer," he said, returning his gaze to Kushina, who pouted a little. "Ah, I wanted to wait a little while longer before getting the fox," she said, pouting more, the more she thought about it. "Oh please," Naruto said softly, flicking her in the nose, to which she covered in feigned pain. "Having the fox is more like having a personal medic on call. And plus it'll be easy for you to repress, you know why?" Naruto asked with a bigger smile. Kushina brought a finger to her lip in thought. It was extremely cute to see her doing that. "Is it because of my super special, ultimately awesome, chakra?" she said with a beaming smile. Naruto and Mito shared a laugh at the beaming girl. "Well yes, that's one of the reasons," Naruto said, wiping a tear from his eye. "It's also because you have lot people that loves you. Ultimately that love will be your weapon against the furball," Naruto said, flicking her nose again. "And call him that, if you're ever face to face with him," Naruto said with a chuckle. Kushina gasped in fear. "I don't think that will be safe." The Jonin flicked her in the nose for the 3rd time. "Of course it's safe. If he tries to eat you, just hold out your hand like this," Naruto said, holding out his left arm, while holding her up with his right, and sing, "Stop, in the name of love." Before you eat me up. It'll be hilarious. He said, laughing loudly as the image of Kushina doing that to the Kyuubi popped in his head. Kushina joined in his laughter while playfully hitting him in the head for suggesting she do something like that. Valley of the End. From under all the rubble Naruto's jutsu caused, a hand finally burst through. It was soaked in blood, only remnants of the glove was shown, and what was shown was sliced through. Obito groaned as he finally got the rocks of his person. He had to use his left arm the entire night, because his right side was destroyed. All his strength was in his enhanced right side, but he no longer had it. He laid there with his Mangekyo Sharingan spinning angrily. That bastard really got stronger. It's too bad I know where to get my body repaired, I'll get him back. As soon as I can move more of my body. He muttered, not feeling his legs, with his right leg being removed and his left was mutilated badly. It was bad enough that he didn't have any of the demonic power the Bijus brought him. He mentally cursed himself, he underestimated the full power of the Rinnegan. And what was worse was that he no longer had the eye he took from Nagato, it being stored in his right sleeve, and that was completely destroyed. So the Uchiha just continued to lay there, not able to use his teleporting ability to leave the area, thanks to the seal still being in place. Chapter 12. Konoha. Tsunade journeyed back into the house, because she got hungry. Her mind never left the subject of the whispering wind she heard over an hour ago. She knew her husband was in the village, because he did the same thing a few times in the past. This time was different though, the other times he would hug her from behind and plant a kiss on her neck. The blonde shook her head of the thoughts, well, she tried. She couldn't stop thinking about her husband, but that didn't distract her from making her something to eat. She heard a crash and smiled. Her children were progressing amazingly, and to top it off, she felt extremely happy that she had another on the way. She rubbed her budding belly amorously at the thought of another life form growing. Rubbing her stomach made her think about when she would rub her mother's stomach when she was pregnant with Nawaki. Speaking of her brother, she hoped he was alright training on his own. She had offered, but he refused, wanting to train on his own. The stubborn little brat, she thought with a smile while making her batch of sandwiches. Whether they were for her or for everyone was still a mystery. Hokage building. Shinzu ultimately hated this Hokage position. It was like everybody in the village was his wife and they were constantly nagging him about every little thing. It was bad enough with one wife, he didn't need thousands. A knock at the door made him sigh mournfully. Come in. He just wanted to go home and reprimand his son for his recent lapse in concentration. He and his teammates had a real chance to be a powerful force and he wanted that to happen. The person walking through the door was none other than his student, Naruto. Naruto, what in Kami's name are you doing here? He asked with a groan. Naruto grinned seeing his sensei in this current state. I just wanted to see how you were doing as interim Hokage. I see you already have some grays in your hair. You've only been the leader for a couple days, he said with chuckles. Shinzu waved off the poor excuse for the reason here and only focused on the last comment. This position is so frustrating. I now pity your brother for what he has to go through every day. It's all right, sensei, we'll be home in no time. I mean, we just arrived at the village some odd hours ago. Whatever about that, how's everything in the village, and by everything I mean, did Danzo try anything yet? Shinzu shook his head. Other than ask for more income and kidnap some people, nothing really. I already have a team searching for the missing persons with little luck. It's actually quite astounding that we can't find them. Naruto thought about the information received. He barely knew anything about Danzo from his time. He barely knew his name and he didn't remember who told him. That man is a pretty good player of hide and seek. He could be anywhere and everywhere. He's a crafty bastard. Naruto thought, clenching his fist. Well, good luck. I'm going to say goodbye to Suheim before I head back to Kumo. Naruto said, turning around. A thought popped in Shinzu's head. That reminds me, how is it that you are here again? Sorry sensei, maybe some other time. Naruto said before body flickering away. Shinzu groaned as Naruto's chakra vanished from his senses. Damn it. The Nara said when he noticed his paperwork stack seemed bigger than it had been before. Was this always this big? XXXXXX. Naruto chuckled as he continued to glide through the air. He was now heading to see Suan, only he wasn't in any rush. How's everything on your end? Naruto spoke to his clone in Kumo. Amazing. This food is delicious. Too bad it's going to waste, since I'm just a clone. The clone replied immediately. Naruto nodded. That is a crying shame. He spoke out loud into his clone. I'll be over there in a little while. I just have a few more things to do on my end. Alright, don't rush on my account. The clone replied before the transmission was cut between the two. That's good to know. Everything is turning out good. Naruto thought before a pulling sensation erupted in his mind. What the? Instantly the area changed from his home village to the destroyed valley. He instantly knew why he was back, because he was face to face with a standing and breathing Obito. I had an inkling you were still alive and kicking, if barely. Naruto said, noting the missing limbs and how he leaned against a broken tree log before the damaged man was immediately pushed several meters back. He turned his head to see a clone in the trees, his fingers in a ram hand seal. I was correct to leave you guys here. Excellent job in bringing me here. The clone's rippling eyes glared daggers at the Jonin's regular eyes. Maybe if you had your Rinnegan activated you would have seen this douche was still alive. The clone snapped back. The original scratched his cheek, before a thought came to mind. No, in fact, I'm glad he's not dead. This gives me the perfect chance to delve his mind for Madara's whereabouts. I had forgotten to do that before. If had handled that man now, Obito will surely die beneath the boulder, if that happens at all. Naruto said, crossing his arms in thought. I might even find out how he was even able to get to where I am. I don't remember the Kamui being able to time travel, only dimensional properties. That's when the conclusion popped in his head. He must have been in an alternate dimension, not back in time. That must have been why he was so far out of his own time. He knew things were weird, war-wise. Hiruzen never fought in the First War. And the Nadaime died in the First War. He had just thought that was him, already, altering time by being here. Maybe I still am, he thought, scratching his cheek harder. The Jonin groaned and stomped toward where Obito was recovering from his push. He was still badly injured and it was a miracle that he was hanging on to that little thread of life. Naruto grabbed the man by the fabric of his destroyed shirt and hefted him to his full height and then some. But before he could summon the outer path, the man spit in his face and promptly died with a smirk on his face. Naruto was too stunned by the act to do anything other than gape at the dead Uchiha. His other hand reached to his cheek and wiped the blob of spit from his faint whisker marks. One last attack on your enemy before death and you chose spit. Naruto said angrily. I have to say, that's the ultimate slap in the face move ever. Naruto yelled, slamming the body on the ground. He rose his hands and formed a Rasengan. Bigger. He yelled as the baseball-sized ball of energy grew to the size of a basketball. Bigger. He yelled again as it grew to the size of his house. Bigger. He yelled one more time as it expanded again, to the size of the Kyuubi. Perfect. He said with a smile as he slammed the giant ball down, destroying the area. The explosion made a huge, quarter-mile-wide cavity in the ground. The Jonin was left in the air, floating with a surprised look on his face. Oops, how can I get the information if there's no body? Damn it, Naruto said with a dejected face. Without further use, Naruto dispelled the clones in charge of the surrounding seal and vanished from midair, now certain that Obito was dead and bodiless. Kumogakure. Naruto appeared in his room, the signature of his clone still a good mile away. He sighed and untied his headband and tossed it on his bed. He was clearly set on simply relaxing for the rest of the evening when a thought came to mind. I'm hungry. He thought with an inward chuckle, forgetting his task to head to the kitchen. He hadn't been paying close attention to any clocks, but it's been 3 hours since he woke up at noon. And he hadn't had anything fulfilling in the past 24 hours. With that in mind, he walked to the kitchen to find something to eat. Hiruzen, again, sat adjacent of Z, the Sandaime Raikage. The two leaders seemed happy about the way the treaty was being handled. Though deep down Hiruzen often felt Z was only using him, but in which way? That was the question plaguing his mind. Do you want to go over the choices of ambassadorship, or wait for later? Z asked. Hiruzen waved off the topic of ambassador and chose a new topic. Let's just focus on keeping each other safe in this shaky time of peace. Of course, getting you and your own up and running is the main topic. Though I am still reeling in surprise on how you have another major village as allies. Sunagaku is still suffering from the war, why not help them out? Hiruzen sat back and stroked his beard in thought. Advice from my brother, that I agree with. Yes, it's true Suna and Konoha are allies. But because of the fact that they fought our ninja, we only have a truce between us. Don't attack us and we won't attack you, sort of deal. Z scoffed, yeah, I know what a truce is. Do you feel that they may back out of the truce someday? Z asked. Hiruzen immediately nodded, of course. Emotions are still running rampant in that village, I'm sure. I don't believe they'll ever forget the people they've lost during that brutal war. Luckily they still have their sannin to keep everything under control. Hiruzen said, quite sad that the world couldn't live in peace, but sadly that's not the world they live in. Z chuckled a bit, I can't blame them, your village has a lot of special individuals of all ages. I wouldn't put it past them to try to snatch a few of them for themselves, the muscular man said with a slight obsessive undertone. Speaking for Suna, or are the words from your desirous heart? Hiruzen questioned sternly. Z chuckled loudly this time. Speaking for everyone from every village in this world. We all want some of everything. That is why there are wars. It's not from hate, but greed. We want this territory for our own, or we need your resources, it's all because of greed. And it's the main reason the major villages grew so large, our greed for more. Hiruzen nodded, knowing what the man was saying was 100% true. Humans loved war, hopefully, we won't see war for many years. Hiruzen said with Z nodding. Agreed. With Naruto. Naruto sat in the living room, a triple-decker ham sandwich on his lap. He smiled and constantly licked his lips, in anticipation. Right when he bit into the big sandwich the door opened and his team walked in, along with his clone. Naruto stared at them like a deer caught in the headlights, while slowly chewing. This is exactly what it looks like, he said after swallowing. Dan glared back at the original Jonin, along with Orochimaru. What the hell is wrong with you? We just had lunch with a clone, no wonder you didn't tell us about the mysterious man. Dan said, seething through his teeth. Why are you so mad? I paid for lunch, the clone said before Orochimaru told him to shut it. The original Naruto brightened up. Hey, do you know what that means, for you too? He asked with a large grin. Free lunch, he said laughing. The other two stared at the Jonin in shock, before grins split their own faces. You sneaky bastard, Dan said before joining in the laughter. Orochimaru couldn't help but smile as well, but he was also a little peeved that he didn't gain his wanting knowledge. He was a scholar, damn it, and scholars get off on knowledge. So because of his anger, the clone was bit by a cobra, promptly dispelling it. Naruto hissed in annoyance, all right, I'll tell you about the man. It's quite simple really, I met that man nearly 18 years ago. It was a little over a month before I was found by patrolling Konoha shinobi. His name was Obito Uchiha, but I called him Tobi, because I was young and that sounded funnier. Naruto said with a believable, reminiscent, chuckle. Really, an outside Uchiha? Wow. Dan spoke, already intrigued. Okay, then what happened? Orochimaru's stern comment broke Naruto out of his false reverie. Oh, right, so the first few days he had helped me because I was an orphan like him, or so I thought. Naruto muttered the last part, purposely to heighten the suspense. The first week was relatively boring, until I saw him running up a tree to get a few apples. Naturally that amazed me, because I've never seen anyone do that before. I immediately started praising the man, asking him to teach me how to do that, though in his words it was more like bugging him constantly. Naruto said, taking another bite of his sandwich and softly groaning. After he finished his mouthful he wiped his mouth of crumbs and continued. He gave in within hours. He said kind of forcefully, like he was angry about some past event. After giving in, he proceeded to train me a little, well in his words it was a little. To me, it was borderline obscene, luckily it prepared me for the future training I went through with Shinzu-sensei. Naruto said offhandedly. It was then the last day I would see him. He told me the truth about himself. He told me that he wasn't entirely an orphan and how he was going to use me to finish what he and his uncle, Madara Uchiha, started. Naruto released a huff of annoyance. Naturally, I had no idea what they had started until he told me. He planted the seed of greed in the crippled mind of the Nadaime Kazekage to expand his village's territory. And slowly but surely Hanzo, the leader of Omegakure, joined the fray, and then lastly the Tsuchikage was also corrupted. It had gotten to the point that our own Nadaime had to join the war to protect his own country. Naruto said before looking at the floor, casting a shadow over his silvery bangs. That was also the day when I found out that the bastard inadvertently told me that he was basically a killing machine who killed my parents. Naruto said, forcing tears to roll down his cheeks, to feign despair. He waited a while to breathe deeply, so he could finish his fake story. I don't really remember what happened next, it was all a blur. The only thing I remember is unbridled power, then black, then waking up in the hospital. Naruto said, stuffing the rest of the sandwich in his mouth. Wow, Madara Uchiha was still alive at that time. I had thought the fight he had with the Shodai ended him entirely. Orochimaru said, disbelieving. That's not even the end. Naruto said, flaring his chakra angrily. After he came back and we vanished from everyone's eyes, he told me he was done with me and now he needed to cut his loose ends. So I killed him. His power didn't seem to grow at all, and he was unprepared for the full release of my powers. I'm nobody's loose end, Naruto grunted through clenched teeth. Believe it or not, but I had trained specifically for yesterday's fight. It's what truly drove me to the highest peak of my power and beyond. And now that that's over, I can truly relax with my wife and many kids and wait to die peacefully, well as peacefully a shinobi could die as. Naruto said, keeping that part entirely truthful. The two other shinobi stared at the silver-haired Jonin in shock. I didn't realize you two had that much history. I had thought he was just somebody you spared while on a mission and he came back for a second try. Dan simply said before he walked away. Naruto rose an eyebrow in thought, really? Naruto thought, staring at the other Jonin with a dumbfounded face. I would have went with, he was somebody after the fame he would receive if he defeated you in a fight. Orochimaru said as he too stood and walked away. Naruto was left there, now staring at the back of the sannin. Unbelievable, Naruto muttered at the simplicity of their backstories. I'm going to train, Naruto muttered again, leaving the house and slamming the door on his way out. XXXXXX. Naruto stood in the training ground where it all began. There were still traces of the gouge in the earth caused by the Hachibi's Bijudama. Also, he wasn't alone in the training wasteland. About half a kilometer away were A and B. Naruto was amazed to see the young child was already chosen to take the Hachibi and was already training. Small traces of the Hachibi's Yuki was leaking in small amounts. Wow, and Kushi-chan has yet to get the Kyuubi. Naruto scoffed. It's not like they were transferring the Hachibi from human to human, while also trying to save the first human's life. Naruto muttered, unzipping his vest. He grinned because it was still in pristine condition. That fight kind of made me want to work on my other areas. Mainly Tai in general, Naruto muttered. After a few minutes Naruto found his solution. He held out his hand and watched as chakra started gathering there. He winced when he had to force the energy to cut into his own skin. Blood quickly started dripping on the floor, his chakra deeply embedded in its molecules. Naruto watched as the dirt soaked his blood. He continued this for 5 full minutes, when he started feeling the effects of blood lost. He cut off the chakra flowing out of his hand and watched as his healing factor kicked in. Then he dug in his hip pouch and grabbed a blood pill. He shook his hand and clenched it several times. So much efforts goes into making this perfect clone. Naruto muttered before taking several deep breaths. He held the air in his lungs and formed the ram seal. After the pressure in his lungs became too strained, he breathed the steam straight into the bloodied soil. While he was breathing into the soil, he went through a series of hand seals, ending with snake. He slammed his hands on the ground and watched as the ground shook a little. After 2 minutes of rumbling, the earth started to bulge up. Naruto narrowed his eyes and weaved through another series of hand seals, this time ending with the unique cross seal of the shadow clone technique. Last time, Naruto thought, hovering his hands over the bulging dirt. Very quickly, the chakra, again, transferred from Naruto to the dirt. It resulted in a small explosion that only created a dirt cloud. Naruto smiled and blew the dirt away, revealing his clone. At first glance, it looked like all the other clones he made over his life. Except for one obvious detail, his eyes. Unlike Naruto's cerulean eyes, the doppelganger's sclera were black, while the irises were red. But just like he said earlier, this was the perfect clone. A perfect blend of Earth's durability, the blood's cautiousness in battle, and Shadow's rivaling intelligence. All those qualities along with a massive amount of chakra, made the clone the perfect sparring partner. He and Tsukumo came up with this ingenious creation 5 years ago, when they went on separate missions, and didn't have each other to train with. Simply making a dozen clones didn't sit well with Tsukumo cause he didn't have nearly as much chakra as Naruto's, seemingly, limitless supply. Though there was a drawback, for Naruto. The clone was inhabited by his evil side. It was a shocker to find out, but he quickly got over it. "Welcome back, Maelstrom. It's been quite a while since I've called on your services," Naruto said, watching as the clone wiped off the dirt that stuck to his arms. "Likewise, Naruto," Maelstrom said, cracking his neck. "So shall we get started?" Maelstrom said, stretching his body, getting the feel back to being in a body again. "You know it's unbearably cramped in that noggin of yours." Naruto joined Maelstrom in stretching his body. "I know, I do that on purpose. If I didn't, you would have immediately attacked me," Naruto said, dropping into a crouch to stretch his legs. Maelstrom chuckled lightly with a smirk. "You know me so well, my friend," he said, dropping into a stance. "Of course, I would have done the same, if the blood pill worked quick enough," Naruto said, mimicking the stance. Maelstrom smirked. "How about, we get that blood pumping then?" he said, quickly dashing towards his creator. Naruto said nothing and met his creation halfway. Their punches collided, resulting in a small shockwave. Naruto acted first and shifted his body to the left, causing Maelstrom to stumble a bit. He spun and swung his leg for a roundhouse to the back of Maelstrom's head. The clone anticipated this and ducked his head a bit, the leg flying harmlessly above him. He grunted and mule kicked at Naruto. Naruto seen this immediately and batted it away. Maelstrom used the momentum to turn his attack into his own roundhouse. Naruto also seen that and blocked with his right forearm. He grunted from the power exerted and quickly grabbed the leg and started spinning. The force of the spin contained the clone's possible counter, for the time being. Naruto released the clone and sent him flying a few feet above the ground. Maelstrom quickly righted himself and in the end slammed his hands and feet on the ground, using chakra to slow his skidding. He noticed by the time he completely stopped, Naruto was already upon him, striking fast with 2 punches. Naruto was quickly surprised and he was able to block his 1-2 punch. He was even more surprised when he rolled back and kicked over him. It was unfortunate of him that Maelstrom kept his hold on him and he crashed into the floor. Fortunately though, he was able to on his feet, in an amazing front flip. Maelstrom wasn't idle and back-flipped above Naruto, their hands still connected. Before Naruto could react, he found Maelstrom's feet planted in his face. Maelstrom did another back flip and landed on his feet. He smirked when he seen Naruto flying backwards. His smirk widened, as he crouched before dashing towards the Jonin. Naruto skidded along the ground, on his back. He traveled another 3 meters before he flipped over and got back on his feet. Fortunately he rubbed his face to relieve the pain a bit, because Maelstrom chose that moment to throw dirt. His dirty attack failed in hampering Naruto's vision, but he was still able to open hand palm him in the chest, sending him backwards yet again. Naruto felt his lungs contract a bit in pain. He had to get back in the fight and soon. He didn't have to wait long as Maelstrom continued his attack and jumped high in the air for an axe kick. Naruto smiled and used that small opportunity to meet the clone in the air. "Too high," he said, connecting a punch to the back of Maelstrom's thigh, before he motioned the clone into the power bomb position and threw him with all his strength, straight at the ground. A big dirt cloud kicked up and Naruto dropped into it, keeping his senses up all the way. He landed on the ground and immediately dodged 2 punches and jumped back from a third. The dirt cloud thinned and completely cleared at that moment to reveal Maelstrom in the middle, his hand lifting his hair up. The action revealed the healing cut along his hairline, that was slowing the flow of blood leaving it. Gotta love this healing factor, huh? He said, dropping the bang. Naruto's eyes widened a bit at that action. It made him realize that he didn't have his headband on. Damn, can't do any headbutts, he thought, mentally berating himself. Or could I? Naruto thought again with a smile. We finished with the warm-up, or do you need more time? Maelstrom questioned, removing the gravity seals. Naruto smirked as he followed suit. You read my mind, evil me. Naruto sighed in relief, feeling lighter than air. I've just thought of a new style of fighting. Shall I put it to the test? Maelstrom rose an eyebrow and looked around, noticing the brothers, now a full kilometer away. Do you think that's such a good idea with an audience? Naruto glanced their way and sucked his teeth. That does pose sort of a problem. How about we give ourselves some privacy? Naruto said, walking towards Maelstrom. The clone smirked. Now, who's reading whose mind? Maelstrom commented with a chuckle. The two stood side by side, Naruto on the left and Maelstrom on the right. Naruto held out his right arm, while Maelstrom held out his left. They intertwined the appendages, so as to have a working pair of hands. It was a little difficult to get comfortable in the position, but a few minutes later they succeeded in flowing flawlessly through hand seals, ending with snake. Doden. Josho Arena. Rising arena. Nearly immediately, walls started rising 100 yards in every direction. They stood a good 10 yards high and were about a full yard thick. The two separated and walked to a safe 10 feet away. Well done, Maelstrom said, looking around. Naruto joined him at admiring their handiwork. Oh please, I couldn't have done this without you, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head. No, don't give me all the credit. It was your magnificent brain that designed this technique. The clone countered the praise. Naruto opened his mouth to say something but nothing came out. True, he said, scratching his chin. All right, let's get round 2 up and running, he said, dropping into a stance. Maelstrom eyeballed the stance with a keen stare. He narrowed his eyes at the familiar sight. Naruto didn't give him any more time before he dashed forward at amazing speed. The clone's eyes widened and he put up a guard, but Naruto was already inside it. The original connected 3 punches to Maelstrom's left and right shoulders and the middle of his chest. After that he connected with a double open palmed strike to the bottom of his chin. The blow lifted the clone a few feet above the ground, in which Naruto quickly spun, did a little flip, and kicked Maelstrom higher into the air. Naruto, now in a handstand, flipped back to his feet and stretched out his hand and yanked it back. Maelstrom's body slowed in the air and promptly dropped at amazing speeds. When Maelstrom hit the ground, he bounced and Naruto quickly pushed him back. Naruto grinned and stretched his hand again. Yet again, Maelstrom's body slowed before lifting high into the air and was thrown all the way towards the far east wall. He weaved through a dozen hand seals. Kaden, Hano Ryu no Bakuden. Flame Dragon Bomb. Naruto breathed a fire dragon out of his mouth that quickly flew and collided with Maelstrom, just as he collided with the wall. The explosion completely destroyed that section of the wall. Luckily their 2-man audience were to the north. I have a feeling this is going to cause some animosity between us, Naruto said, watching the smoke billow in the distance. What do you think? Maelstrom shouted from his down position. Naruto had the audacity to chuckle and rub his head. A burst of chakra signaled Maelstrom's release, also the earth over him blasted outwards. Would it help if I said sorry? Naruto asked, watching Maelstrom slowly walk towards him. Nothing was said, which made Naruto nod in agreement. I thought so. I guess it's time to start the real fight. When that was said, Maelstrom vanished along with Naruto. X stood with B, training him in controlling his newly obtained tailed beast. But since he didn't have his own, he was serving more of a crowd control role. He was strong enough to keep his little comrade in line. They've been at it for an hour before the silver-haired Jonin from Konoha appeared. A watched from the corner of his eye, before he noticed he made another clone. From the distance between them, it looked like a regular Earth clone. That made sense as they started sparring, with only taijutsu. His turned his eyes back to the main task at hand. Alright, I'm going to have you try to do something a little different than what the other containers were doing. A said, crossing his arms. B stopped his push-ups to look up at his sensei. Really? What? I didn't say stop. A yelled, causing B to quicken his pace, reasoning with the Hachibi to stop his wanton destruction. But first you need to completely exhaust your physical energy so that your mental energy allows you to enter your mind. I would have you try meditation, but you are far too hyper for that. I added with a shake of his head. B only seemed to slow down at the thought of entering his tailed beast-infested mind. Are you crazy? I don't have to enter my mind to know that it wants to eat me. The muscled Jonin ignored the yelling, but paid attention to the words. It's going to happen either way. Either you appease the beast now, or I have to go through the arduous task of finding another bee when that thing claws its way out of you. That last part sped the boy up as he became determined to appease the Hachibi. If I appease the beast, will you throw a feast? B said with a strained voice. I chuckled at the rhyme. Hey, that was pretty good. The boy strained for another push-up. You really think so? I chuckled at the small bit of enthusiasm in his voice. No doubt, you have flow. I said with another chuckle as he finished his rhyme. That's quite entertaining, you should write some rhymes down. With renewed vigor, B pushed himself beyond his limits to try his hardest at survival. I turned his head, when he noticed the explosion in the distance. I sure would like to see how he fights. But I have better things to do. I steeled himself to focus on keeping B from dying. Back with Naruto. Naruto vanished from his spot, only to reappear back in it, on his back. Maelstrom was on top, with his right hand clenched around the original's throat. He rose his left and a Rasengan immediately formed. Naruto's Rinnegan shined back to life, pushing Maelstrom up and away from Naruto's neck. He sputtered for air and immediately coughed it out once it entered his lungs. He looked up and widened his eyes when Maelstrom pointed his finger at him, his Rasengan smaller and dark blue. The eyes of the perfect clone were darker red, with a small hint of orange, along with a horizontal pupil. I only gathered enough nature chakra for this technique. I guess I should thank you for not continuing your assault earlier. Rasendangan. Spiral bullet. Naruto gulped as he stared down the condensed ball of energy. Surely you wouldn't kill me with my own technique. Maelstrom smirked evilly as he knew this was going to be over one way or another. It's kind of poetic, don't you think? You were killed by yourself, with your own technique, during a simple spar. Naruto shook his head as he stood up. Fine, but can I say one last thing before you end us? Maelstrom's little bullet pulsed as it grew a bit before shrinking back down. Naruto nodded, swiping the dirt from his clothes. All I have to say is, you are me and I am you, he said looking sternly at his double. Maelstrom let out a boisterous laugh. What kind of last words are those? The clone started before a finger snap sounded through the air, causing his condensed chakra ball to explode. The radius of the explosion clearly reached 30 feet high and was a clear 10 feet wide diameter. Naruto shook his head at the crater he created. I should have simply used 100 shadow clones. Naruto said, jumping atop the nearest wall. His stomach chose that moment to growl, causing Naruto to let out a chuckle. I'm hungry again, he said, setting off in a simple walk back to the village. It wasn't like he was in a hurry. Kumokage building. The two Kage were still busy with their meeting, so Orochimaru chose that he should do his job and guard the Hokage. His comrade, Dan, was hiding somewhere, also guarding the Hokage. They needed to report to their leader about Naruto's encounter, because he certainly wasn't going to. Basically, the only thing they needed to do was wait, and keep their senses sharp. Orochimaru was never this bored in his life. Of course, he liked easy missions, but boring missions were the bane of his existence. Maybe I should train, like Naruto. That would be a good way to pass the time, he thought before he heard the soft hissing of one of his snakes. It slowly slid up his leg before it made its way around his neck. He hissed some more and Orochimaru nodded, thankful for its update. The meeting was finished and Hiruzen was on his way down. After the snake was dispelled, Orochimaru pushed off the wall he was leaning against. Hiruzen walked through the door that led up the stairs to the Raikage's office. He nodded to Orochimaru and Dan, who then appeared in front of the cage. Good news, you two, this mission is nearing its end. I have one more meeting to sit through, along with the village's council, sometimes this week. During that meeting we'll simply finalize all contracts. Hopefully Kumo doesn't have a civilian council to slow things down. the leader spoke as they walked out of the building towards their hotel. During their walk, Dan chose to fill the Hokage in about Naruto's surprise visitor. Hiruzen nodded his head in thanks. Those two did speak as if they knew each other. The fact that he was an Uchiha was rather shocking, but not as shocking as to learn that he was the cause for their recent war. It fit together, so it was probably true, but still, Hiruzen couldn't help but worry there was more to the story than what was told. Naruto had been rather strong, even at his young age. His previous training wouldn't have been that much of a help, as it only spanned for a number of weeks. No, he fought like he had been doing it for a few years already. Hiruzen scratched his beard in thought. He was going to have to confront his brother about it, maybe even force the truth out of him, because he was certain that some of what he has said from the past have been lies. Hokage's hotel. Naruto sighed while entering the hotel, a clean dango stick in his mouth. Kumo's dango were absolutely exquisite compared to the dangos in Konoha. Anko would love these things to death, Naruto thought, thinking about the crazy lady from the Chunin exams all those years ago. Now, because of his train of thought, he was thinking about the first time he went through the Chunin exams. Looking back, he couldn't help but hate how things turned out. Everything just went downhill at that point of his ninja career. Sure, everything seemed to be going well, with obtaining a new sensei and gaining the Toad contract, but nothing was how it was supposed to be. Stupid Orochimaru gave Sasuke the curse mark and corrupted the shit out of him. After that, Sasuke just seemed to get further and further out of his reach. There was a time when they teamed up to defeat the Ribi-fused Shino. But it seemed like that event only pushed him further away. Finally came their final encounter, a fight that he would never forget. Flashback. Naruto stood in front of his longtime rival. Two black elongated blades were held in a reverse grip as he gathered nature chakra. So you took your brother's eyes, you reached an all-time low, Sasuke Tem. The blonde seethed, his pupils stretching horizontally as he entered sage mode. Sasuke said nothing as his three-tomo Sharingan morphed into his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. The design was a mix of his and his brother's Mangekyo Sharingans. He watched as the strange pigmentation around the blonde's eyes continued to darken. Naruto lowered his gaze and vanished from his spot. He could tell he was surprised by how he tensed. Unfortunately, the raven-haired teen was able to block his enhanced strike with his Kusanagi and push him back. He did a backflip and landed with a slight smirk as he watched a trail of blood drip down the boy's cheek. He watched as Sasuke wiped the blood with his finger. Blood, but how? He asked before a twisted smile darkened his features. This just became a lot more exciting. The blonde's smirk widened as he hopped back more and extended the length of his wind blades. He flexed his wrists as he got ready for an intense fight. Sasuke didn't disappoint and immediately charged. Lightning cackled around his sword as he moved to pierce the blonde. Naruto narrowed his eyes and parried the sword to the side and spun around to appear behind Sasuke. Too bad the Uchiha wanted that to happen, and lightning shot out from all around his body. Chidori Nagashi. Thousand Birds Current. Immediately Naruto's muscles began to constrict in pain. It was only thanks to his sage mode that he was able to endure the pain to escape to a safe distance. During his jump back, he threw both of his elongated blades at Sasuke's back. Naruto was unprepared to see a purple flaming ribcage block his projectiles. Just as fast as it appeared, it vanished, along with Sasuke. The teen appeared below Naruto, initiated his taijutsu move, the Lion's Barrage. Naruto shook his head before Sasuke could immobilize him and substituted himself with a log. Now on the ground, the blonde went through a few hand seals. Futon. Kami Oroshi. Godly wind from the mountains, he said, sending the vortex snaking its way towards the airborne Uchiha. Said Uchiha growled at the suspended log and sliced through it in anger. He twisted in the air and glared at the blonde, before he noticed the vortex heading towards him. He quickly formed a few hand seals. Kaden, Goryuken no Jutsu. Great Dragon Fire Technique. The dragon collided with the vortex and the resulting explosion sent Sasuke further up into the air. Naruto stood, annoyed that Sasuke reacted the way he did. He looked up higher and noticed the Uchiha falling to the ground at a slightly fast speed. He narrowed his eyes, because he was sure he would have released his second stage cursed seal to remain in the air. Instead he landed on the ground with slightly scorched clothing. Impressive Dobi. I see you finally drifted away from shadow clones. Sasuke said, patting his Akatsuki cloak, his sword only a few meters away from him, having lost his grip on it. Naruto grinned, keeping his eyes from contacting Sasuke's. Oh, I didn't drift away, I just hadn't done it yet. Kage Bushin no Jutsu, he said, forming the cross seal as 5 shadow clones appeared around him before running towards Sasuke. That's all you're going to make? Sasuke questioned, dropping into a stance. Why do you ask? Naruto said, commanding his shadow clones to be cautious while they attacked. Sasuke only smirked as his eyes spun dangerously. You should have made more. He smirked as the first clone approached him. He batted away the direct straight and sent one of his own. The clone dodged and sent a left hook, to which Sasuke grabbed and sent a straight kick into the clone's stomach, dispelling him. A second clone came from behind, while a third was only seconds behind him. The smirk on Sasuke's face never left as he spun around, his Chidori already active. It instantly shot out, piercing both of the clones, causing them to disperse in a cloud of smoke. Futon. Daitapa. Great breakthrough, a 4th and 5th clone exclaimed, on both sides of Sasuke. Alone, the attack wouldn't have done a thing, but being crushed by 2 was a little ingenious on Naruto's part. It was unfortunate thought that Sasuke had his ultimate defense at the ready in a split second. I see you've also gotten smarter since we last did battle, too bad you're still as weak as ever, he said as once again the purple ribcage vanished. Sasuke smirked and stomped on the floor. Chidori Nagashi, he said as lightning tore through the ground towards both clones. Both clones were able to jump in the air, towards Sasuke, who only continued to smirk. Meanwhile, the original Naruto stood on the sidelines and watched as his clones continued to drop one by one. He always was the better fighter against multiple enemies. Naruto thought, making another clone. Ready when you are, boss, the clone said, making Naruto nod. Naruto held out his hand as the clone helped him form a Rasengan. I have got to learn how to do this on my own, Naruto thought as he charged at his teammate, who just defeated the last of his clones. With his speed he was able to appear right beside Sasuke in a second. The Uchiha grew surprised and black flames burst to life between the duo. Naruto's swirling ball of chakra turned to black flames and he jumped back in shock. He cancelled the technique and was surprised the black flames simply fell to the ground. He remembered the first time he seen those flames was when he first encountered Itachi. Jiraiya said those flames last for 7 days and 7 nights, before going out. Naruto thought, hopping back away from the flames. Naruto cursed as his surprise attack died down. He flew through more seals and deeply inhaled. Futon. Atsugai. Pressure damage, he thought, blowing out a huge blast of wind. The blast hit the unprepared Uchiha directly, causing Naruto to grin. He didn't waste time and ran forward, creating 2 clones. He and his clones jumped in the air and the original used his clones as footholds to leap higher into the air. After that he formed 2 more clones that helped him create 2 Rasengans. Sasuke recovered down below, his cloak heavily damaged, but still on him. He could tell that the blonde wasn't finished and looked up to see him creating 2 Rasengans. Too slow, he thought, blowing out a large fireball after completing the hand seals. Naruto cursed and used one of the Rasengans to punch through the fiery ball. After he safely passed through the flames he saw Sasuke armed with a Chidori. The 2 techniques collided with whips of chakra and lightning flinging around wildly. Sasuke was pushed down, creating a small crater from the force of the swirling blue orb. After that the 2 techniques ended with Naruto simply dropping down in front of the Uchiha. He continued his assault with ferocity never before seen in him, without him calling upon some demonic chakra. A flurry of punches connected with Sasuke's face, before kicks were introduced as well. Naruto stepped on Sasuke's knee and pushed himself up, to knee the Uchiha in the nose. While still in the momentum he grabbed Sasuke's head and flipped over him and used his motion to throw the Uchiha in the air. With a grin he flew through a series of hand seals and held out his hands. Futon. Kami Oroshi, he said as the familiar vortex made a second attempt at the Uchiha. The attack hit true, causing Naruto to widen his grin. That's going to piss him off. True to Naruto's word, Sasuke only spent a few seconds on the ground before a purple cone of chakra erupted towards the sky. What was worse, his sage mode chose that moment to leave his system. That was faster than I thought. Naruto thought, jumping a few meters back for his own safety. Even with the long distance between them, Naruto still felt that wasn't far enough. I'm not surprised. You've already been fighting for 25 minutes. You've already improved it since the time you fought Pain, by 10 whole minutes. Kyuubi said, causing Naruto to smile a little. Don't congratulate me yet. Let's see if I can survive this fight. Naruto thought, staring at the giant spectral form that was Sasuke's Susanoo. Let me introduce you to the god of storm and seas, Susanoo. Sasuke's angry voice pierced through the gap between the two opponents. Hey Susanoo, Naruto said, keeping the sheer excitement out of his voice. And let me reintroduce you to the Lord of Biju, the strongest force alive, the power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto said as a crimson cone shot through the air. Malicious chakra overwhelmed the Uchiha's already wicked chakra. But Sasuke only smirked, and soon the monstrosity was fully decked out in his complete armor. Who would have known that the two of us would be this strong so soon in our lives? Naruto said in a slightly demonic voice. Sasuke scoffed. Speak for yourself. I always knew I was going to be this strong. I'm one of the elite in my already elite clan. I was born strong, Sasuke said as his Susanoo rose its arm. By that time Naruto already had 4 tails swaying behind him. Though this time was different, the Kyuubi was making sure that his power didn't deter the blonde's mind from the goal, but it was hard. I would be lying if I said I wasn't born to be strong. I am the son of the Yondaime Hokage. I would be livid with myself if I didn't turn out the same. With that, Sasuke fired a surprise arrow that Naruto barely dodged. Naruto ran, on all fours, to the side, as Sasuke continued to fire arrow after arrow at him. Naruto opened his maw and fired 3 crimson chakra balls at him. Sasuke's Susanoo used its bow to bat the first ball away. He used the other arm to punch the second ball straight into the ground. That was a mistake on his part because the third ball burst through the dirt cloud nearly immediately. Though he wasn't in danger, because his Susanoo formed 2 more arms that effectively stopped the energy and sent it into the air. That wasn't the only thing to burst through the cloud, as Naruto was promptly upon the god. He opened his maw and fired another blast. The attack proved effective as it seemed to destabilize the construct a bit, to create an opening. Naruto spun and entered the opening and descended down towards Sasuke, in a classic Suga. Sasuke cursed and jumped back, a Chidori cackling to life as he did. He thrust his Chidori at the circling blonde. It was simply batted away by the strong wind surrounding the blonde. He suffered some damage, but he was able to substitute away before he lost a limb. Naruto stopped his spinning and smirked at the bleeding Uchiha. What happened, Sasuke? You scared of seeing your own blood? Naruto said, still keeping his eyes from meeting Sasuke's, especially in the state he's in. Sasuke scoffed at the blonde's arrogance. You got lucky, Dobi. It won't happen again, Sasuke said as his Susanoo repaired itself. Surprise end flashback. Naruto was knocked out of his flashback to see his brother in front of him, wildly waving his hand in front of his face. What the hell is wrong with you? I've been doing this for the past 5 minutes. You had me worried, Hiruzen said, finally backing up. Naruto looked around and realized everyone was here. Sorry Ni-san, I had a lot on my mind, Naruto said casually, throwing his dango stick at the door behind him. Hiruzen simply shrugged, not wanting to say what came to his own mind. As long as you're not reliving the war and going crazy, I'm fine with that. Naruto nodded, remembering hearing about some guy being hospitalized because he kept reliving battles during the war. It was a sad sight to see someone seclude themselves in their own minds, to that degree. You don't have to worry about that, brother, I am right in my own mind. So tell me about this treaty, how's the progress? Hiruzen sat down on the couch away from Orochimaru and Dan, rather smoothly, considering what just happened. The Raikage is very cautious around me, I can tell. Though he has let some of his views loose about everything. I already have a feeling that he's planning something, I just don't know when he's going to launch that plan. Naruto thought about what he knew from Kumo, wishing he paid more attention to history back in the day. All he knew was the brothers attacking the Nadaime, and the attempted kidnapping of Hinata, which resulted in Neji's father being executed. You want me to shadow him? Hiruzen shook his head, No, I already have Dan for that. I don't want you to do anything. Hopefully there won't be any problems and we can finish this and return home. Hiruzen said, releasing an agitated sigh. Naruto shrugged and looked at Dan, who was in the other room getting ready to shadow another village's cage. You need me to equip your attire to keep you from getting detected? Naruto asked. No, I think I'll be alright. This mission is already helping me get back in the zone. Thanks for the offer, by the way. Naruto heard the reply. So I guess, I'll replace him as your other bodyguard? Naruto asked, to which Hiruzen nodded. That makes sense. We'll just say it's my turn to play babysitter. Naruto said, which gained him a surprise slap to the back of his head. Ow, I keep forgetting how fast you are, old man. Naruto said, holding his head. I'm not old brat, I'm just seasoned. Hiruzen said, walking to the window, looking down on Kumogakure, though it wasn't the same as it was when he was home. He had no obligation to these people and they could easily become his enemy. Over-seasoned if you ask me. Naruto muttered, thankful nobody heard, as he too stood up. I'm going to take a shower, perhaps we could get a card game going when I return. Naruto offered, walking to the bathroom. Sure, maybe some family time is just what is needed. Hiruzen agreed, creating a clone to go by a set of playing cards. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.